you.
Yes. And I'm trying to catch names as I see you join. No intention if I don't catch you, but a sincere welcome to everybody who's in the process of joining us right now. So give it a few more minutes. It's not quite 2 o'clock yet. Val said it's very dry out in the Panhandle, so I'm sure that's kind of the way it is around the state. Jackie, welcome. I see you've joined us. Lauren. Everybody is quiet today.
Good to be here.
Pardon me?
I say it's good to be here.
Yes, yes. Always a good day. We have a good number of registrations, so I'm going to wait just a couple more minutes
Oh, yeah, by chance.
But I think there's like 60 people on.
as we approach 2 o'clock.
I have to close down some things. I have everything possible open on my computer. Makes it hard to go live stream what you're wanting to live stream if you have all this other stuff open where you can't find it.
That's kind of my brain these days. Too many things open and you can't find anything.
Too many browsers, huh?
Hi, everyone.
Hey, John,
see you
how are
again.
you?
John,
It's been a
Good to
while.
have you.
it
It has been. I see Paula and some other individuals are joining us. Sharon has joined us. So Michelle, for all of you who are as old as I am and you grew up on Romper Room at the end of the program, Miss Linda or whoever the teacher was would do her magic mirror thing. You know, she saw you and it always felt special when she saw and said my name. So do want to recognize and acknowledge all of you who are joining us this afternoon. So thank you for making this a priority.
So I watched the construction guys on my roof behind me leave, and now they're back.
Okay.
So let's hope they aren't bringing the hammer drill again.
Yes. Always interesting. So we'll give it just another minute or so, and then we'll get rolling here. Because we have a lot of great information that our presenters are sharing with us today. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes,
Great,
thank you
great.
for that sound check.
John, thank you for getting the information out to some different, we have some different attendees this time. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, no problem. It's, we have this pilot program called Teaching Nebraska Trades, and we're working with Hastings. Hello, Allison, and Mid-Plains and Northeast, and then Builders of the Future out of Omaha. So I sent it out to all them, and hopefully we'll have some folks listening in. But yeah, it's an important topic that we're passionate about too. So thanks.
Super. Thanks for that nod and for getting the word out, John. So
John, real fast, since I'm ignorant, who are you with? Since you know everybody else in the higher ed community, you just leave us out.
I work for the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority, and I'll have to change my name on here so it says NIFA. I've been here 4 years, and I am the Partner and Program Development Manager. And we have a partnership with Nebraska Community Foundation, and we have a pilot to try to help retain construction trade instructors at community colleges and to teach trades in the high schools. And it's real new. We just started it. So if you want to, I can put my contact info in the chat if you want to talk more sometime.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Super. Okay. Well, I do see others starting to join us, and I think it's good time. I do want to honor everybody's time and get started because I am really looking forward to what our speakers have to share today. So be sure and let us know as we continue on that you are here by using your chat box to tell us where you're joining us from today. So, and I do want to recognize the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for their financial investment and support of the HomeNE Learning Network. It's been invaluable to us. So a reminder to all of you who are attending that if you do have some Zoom issues, we are putting this on our SCED YouTube channel. So feel free to hop over there and watch it there as well. So welcome and good afternoon. If I haven't already introduced myself, I'm Lori Ferguson, and I am with the South Central Economic Development District here in Holdridge. Thank you for joining us today and contributing to the growth of HomeNE. Whether this is your first webinar or one of many, maybe you're some of those individuals who just never missed our third Thursday of the month webinar. Thank you. So we have a goal of making sure that housing success is being realized throughout the state. And one of the resources is this learning network that we are the lead agent for. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from a dynamic duo, as I call them, of presenters. Dr. Jared Burgoon, he is an assistant professor of construction management at the University of Nebraska-Kearney, and Becca Lemkuhler, she is also a student at UNK and is studying in the field of design and construction management. And so have known Becca personally. She has interned with us this summer here at SCED and have just really enjoyed her presence here in the office this summer. So I'm looking forward to their presentation today. So before we begin, this is your opportunity to tell us what interests you about today's topic. And then an aside, we always like to know how you or your community might be benefiting from HomeNE and your presentation in this learning network. So feel free to use the chat box and add those answers to those questions there, and we'll be watching those. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon Heffley, who is the Executive Director here at South Central Economic Development District, and she will be introducing our speakers.
Thanks, Lori. Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to the August edition of the HomeNE 2022 webinar series. I don't know that I want to say 2022 too many times in a row, but we are there and school has started. What an exciting time. Hopefully a lot of our communities are gearing up for what can we be doing this fall before we get into winter. And I hope that what our topic is going to be discussing today will be very pertinent to that. HomeNE is designed for people from across Nebraska and beyond that are seeking to successfully implement local housing solutions. HomeNE's purpose is to provide a setting that provides face-to-face and online opportunities to foster interaction, engagement, and skill building for those that are passionate about addressing the housing shortage in their communities. It's also a setting that empowers and encourages those of you who participate to apply what you learn. And we hope that after each session, you're able to get off and say, okay, I need to email this person or that person. I need to get this document, whatever that is, that will move you forward. So as Lori said, today we're joined by Dr. Jared Burgoon and Becca Lemkuhler. Dr. Burgoon is an assistant professor of construction management at the University of Nebraska-Kearney. Prior to transitioning to academia, he worked in the construction industry for almost a decade and at organizations ranging from the construction trades to a publicly traded home builder. He began teaching at Colorado State University in 2016 and transitioned to UNK in 2021. His research focuses on construction management workforce development with a particular focus on diversity and inclusion in construction management education. He has a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management from Brigham Young University an MBA from Texas A&M University, and a PhD in Education and Human Resource Studies from Colorado State University. He currently lives in Holdridge with his wife and 4 children. Rebecca Lemcooler served as an intern with the South Central Economic Development District this summer, and our communities were very blessed by her work, I'll tell you. She's pursuing, currently enrolled at the University of Nebraska-Kearney, pursuing a degree in interior design with an emphasis in construction management. Becca has a passion for developing affordable housing through the design and construction of tiny houses. She's a mother to Hazel and is focused on getting her degree to see what difference she can make in the housing industry. So Jared and Becca, welcome to our HomeNE network, and it's turned over to you.
All right, well, I'm starting off. I'm Becca and this is Jared. I've just learned through the SCED internship that I've gone through, just a lot of things that have opened my eyes to the construction world and the housing industry that I just didn't really think that I would ever really think about when going through the interior design program. This was brought to my attention, and so I think it's definitely something that's important to bring to others' attention. You can go to the next slide. So SCED has identified that the workforce is the center of the economic development industry, and everything kind of just surrounds it. I mean, you have to have housing for your jobs, you have to have childcare for potential children that you have, and it's known that technology and broadband is leading the nation in the way it's developing, that everything's going via Zoom now. I mean, this wouldn't have been possible if this technology has not been brought to our attention. So with the workforce, a lot of many people are focused on like the quality of life rather than spending money or things like that. They're looking for a simpler life and going more towards home and not focusing so much on the cost aspect of things. They're not, with Nebraska, they're more focused on from home jobs rather than in jobs that are located within a company. With the Nebraska's rate of 1.5%, it's lower than the national rate of 3.6%. The Nebraska income is at $164,000 for the median, which is about average. It's not great and it's not low. It makes the quality of life better where you're not so focused on making big bucks. And that's kind of what Nebraska strives for, is a better life. You can skip to the next slide. The Nebraska Youth Survey went through a survey in August of 2021, and they interviewed 7th to 12th graders and found from the 2022 survey that there was an increase of kids wanting to move to smaller, more rural areas rather than a large metropolis like Omaha or like the big cities. And that just means that they're not looking for like big companies. They're looking for more small town, more mom and pop shops. That's what they're looking to work for rather than a big corporation. And the quality of life is just a lot better.
So, all righty. So thank you, Becca. And just so everybody understands, Becca is a student in the interior design program at UNK, and I teach in the construction management program. But I like to consider us sister programs, as it were. All right. So all of her teachers are literally, their offices are right next to mine. And so the interaction between the design and the construction program and where Becca's coming from and CM, there's a lot of overlap there. But what I want to transition to at this point, and I really kind of want to pick up on what Becca was just talking about, was those individuals from rural communities in Nebraska thinking about a pipeline for those who want to return, right? And even from individuals who aren't from rural communities. who potentially want to go to rural communities. And so a lot of my portion of this presentation will just potentially throw out some ideas on how to make that happen. I'm using UNK because that's what I'm most familiar with, but I think the concepts that we're talking about apply to all sorts of institutions, community colleges, other workforce development centers and education centers around the state. So let me first give you, before I get into that, let me talk a little bit about UNK and our construction management program. Potentially how we differ than some of the other vocational and skills education programs around the state. So at UNK, we are a construction management program. And so really what we're focusing on is training those individuals who ultimately manage the construction projects, all right? In order to manage projects, obviously we need a trained and motivated workforce. So as I go through here, please know that I recognize that. That's just not necessarily what we do at UNK. But in the CM program at UNK, we're sitting right now at about 100 major and minor students. And our students are doing all right. Right now, we have 100% placement, and last year they were coming out of college making 67.5 on average. All right. One thing to think about, and this is what I think about quite a bit, is approximately 90% of our students are male. And that's not just that's here at UNK. That's at other educational institutions, and that's really the profession more generally. So if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, women hit 10% just before COVID in CM and dropped back down. So from our perspective, that's something that we really need to improve on. But maybe I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So for our students who do graduate, they're making good money. There's 100% placement, about 60% between 2016 and 2021 stayed in Nebraska. 2 years ago, which is the latest numbers that I could pull from our career center, almost 75% wound up leaving the state. And when they wound up leaving, they wound up going to Minnesota, to Iowa, but also to places like Vegas and Oregon, and across the country. So they're going where the jobs, where bigger companies are taking them, right? And right now, about 85% of our students wind up going into civil, commercial, and industrial construction, right? So really, really big buildings and structures, things like that. Only about 10% are going into residential, all right? So thinking about housing and developing developing housing in rural communities and around the state, you might be asking yourselves, like, okay, given the current state of construction management, how can rural communities attract our new graduates? And the long and the short of it is, right now you probably can't, right? At least not straight out of school, all right? But what I do think rural communities can do is, while they're at UNK or while they're at other places studying, they can start to show ways back to rural communities, right? You can start to develop relationships and give students, the prospective workforce in the future, a very clear path how to return, all right? And so the next portion of my presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, just ideas for creating pipelines back to your rural communities, right? Back to our rural communities. And so I came up with three things here. All right. Three ideas. So the first one is just simply reaching out and asking, and I'll get into all these a little bit more in detail, but reaching out and asking, connecting now so that we so that students can see a pathway home in the future. And then really thinking big, right? Looking to collaborate. So just so, and I don't know what people think about higher ed here, right? I hear different things. I can tell you at UNK and our college in particular, we are focused on supporting rural communities. All right. So just FYI, my boss's boss, the dean of the College of Business, he's on this call right now. All right. So I might get a text or a call right after this saying, Jared, we need to talk. But he is invested in this. We are invested in rural Nebraska. We had the senior vice chancellor come to our college meeting 2 days ago, and she laid out 3 goals, right? The first goal was the rural health center. The second goal, like her primary objective, is supporting rural communities in Nebraska, right? So as we're thinking about creating a pipeline of not just construction students, but also, you know, our future attorneys or lawyers or other professionals, bringing them back to these communities, to our rural communities. I really think it's important that if you want to attract those individuals back, you come to places like UNK and just come and talk to us, right? We want to support you. We want to support our rural communities. We want to support our students from our rural communities. And so, but the only way that we can really do that effectively is if you reach out and ask. So I'm going to tell 2 quick stories here. All right. The first one is how Becca and I ended up here today. You know, I've lived in multiple places all around the world, and particularly in the US. When I moved to Nebraska, I realized that Nebraskans, they are very, very tied to their rural communities like no other people that I've seen before, right? They love their small communities. They want to be there. And that's something that I hadn't seen. And so after speaking with some of my students and realizing that a lot of them were going to go to Omaha, but that they ultimately wanted to come back, I just saw a little something for SCED just online. And so I picked up the phone and I said, hey, you all are looking for a construction manager in Holdridge. What the heck do you do? And I got a response. I got to sit down with Leanne and Sharon, and we got to talk a little bit about SCED. And that opened some doors. It opened some doors. You know, there was a house here that SCED was moving, and the freshman interior design class, they got to use that as the case study model for one of their classes, right? And so that really opened the doors for some of them on ways to go back to rural communities. Becca here, I knew that she was interested in tiny houses and creating workforce housing and that sort of thing from both a design and construction perspective. And so she was able to make the connection here and intern here. And all of that happened just through picking up the phone, just through reaching out and seeing what was happening. The long and the short of it is we can't reach out to every community around, but if you reach out to us, we're happy to sit down. We're happy to talk to you. We're happy to think of ideas how to support your community and rural Nebraska more generally. All right. I want to tell one other quick story here, and that's the history of CM. And I'm a little excited that I get to work in a major like CM. For one, I love construction, and for two, the way CM was created. So after World War II, with all these GIs coming back, these GIs with the GI Bill got access to two things. They got access to housing, and they got access to higher education. And so in the post-World War II era, when all of these houses were going up around the country, construction companies, home builders in particular, realized like, hey, we don't have the workforce to manage these types of jobs. We need people to help us. And so they went to different colleges and universities around the country, and they laid out a case. They said, hey, this is the skills we need. Can you help us make this happen? And they did. Construction management was one of the first interdisciplinary majors on college campuses, right? At least at Colorado State, where I came from. So it was the first major that didn't fit well into a particular box. And it really was created by members of the community going to the university, stating what they needed, and then co-constructing an idea of how to fulfill that need. And construction companies to this day, they support construction management programs, and we support them. So yeah, though, just reach out and ask. All right. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is really thinking about how to get individuals back to our rural communities, and that's to connect now for the future. Can we slide back one slide real fast? Sorry. Yeah, let's connecting now for the future. And so as I mentioned earlier, we have really, really good job placement, and we have really, really good starting salaries, right? So just straight out of our college, most of our students who are younger and single, they wind up taking these jobs, right? They wind up going to work for big commercial construction companies in larger cities, both here in Nebraska and outside of the state. But a lot of them feel like they want to come home in the future. All right. And so when I'm talking about this, what I'm really talking about is developing paths so that they can come home. All right. And so just hear me out why I think this is important. All right. And I'll give another construction management story here real fast. In 2008, I would say most construction management programs around the country, they had a strong emphasis in residential construction. When I graduated from BYU, almost 100% of the majors, probably 90% of the majors, were going into residential and home building construction. And then all of a sudden happened, right? Like, so we had this market crash in 2008. And those home builders that had been supporting construction management programs, they just left. Like, they didn't show up again, right? They stopped coming to career fairs. They stopped just showing up for events. They essentially ghosted a lot of these construction management programs. And when that happened, in conjunction with the shift in the market, CM programs floated further and further and further away from residential construction and home building. And so I know right now there are very, very few programs in the country that focus on home building anymore, right? They don't focus on residential construction in general. And home building gets relegated lower and lower and lower on the desirability poll, right? And so yes, did they have jobs to give right then and there in 08? No, they didn't. But by not showing up anymore and not showing that there would be a path here in the future and not supporting programs, they essentially ostracize themselves more and more and more, right? Till they simply can't attract right now. When I was at Colorado State, we had 130 employers show up for every career fair, and 6 of them were home builders. They couldn't even get in the door anymore because the other companies, it was essentially the companies that had been supporting the longest got priority. And so they could no longer get in the door. And so part of creating a pipeline is showing up and being there, even when people might not be coming right away, right? And so I want to contrast this with another thing that I've worked on in the past and that's really important to me, and that's getting more women into construction management, right? I love construction. I think it's a great field. And it's a great field in different ways. It actually, most people probably don't know this, construction management has the second lowest gender pay gap of any occupation out there. So women in construction are more likely to earn on par with men versus every other industry but one. So we have a very, very low gender pay gap. And quite frankly, we need women from both a workforce perspective, but also just diversity of thought and ideas to elevate our industry to the next level. But what happens is, I think talking to women, and I've done some research on this in the past and spoke with my students, a lot of them can't picture themselves in the role of a construction manager, or they don't even know what that means, right? Like, well, I got a crazy uncle, Ralph, that does construction, but he drinks a lot and nobody likes to invite him to the family parties, right? That's all I know about construction, right? And so how do we as construction management educators and construction management industry show what construction management really is, right? Like this is a good career, something you should opt into, not something you should do by default because you couldn't find anything else. And so what several CM programs are doing around the country is essentially creating women in construction programs where we bring in high school individuals, right? Young women in high school, young women of color, young women from different socioeconomic backgrounds in rural and urban communities. And we're bringing them together for a construction management camp, right? And from there, they can start to visualize themselves as construction managers. They can start to visualize what construction management is and what their place in that industry might be, right? And so essentially, does that mean all of them are going to come to construction? Probably not, right? But what we're doing is planting the seed so these high school freshmen, when they're thinking about a college major, maybe they're just going to step back, and instead of flipping over and saying, oh, construction, that's weird, that's what Uncle Ralph does. No, like let me look into that. Is that really something that I think I'd enjoy doing? And so we're creating a pathway back to we're creating a pathway to construction management. We're allowing them to visualize themselves there. And so what does this mean? What does this mean for rural community development people and individuals who want to grow their own towns, right? One of the things that I think you can do and that we can all do is connect the people from your town with the college students and let them talk. Show them a path back to your communities so that in 5 or 6 years when their first kid comes, or life changes and they say, hey, you know what, Omaha's not exactly what I want. I really want to be back in a town like my own to raise my kids, or just to be around my family, right? They have those connections. They made those connections in college. They spoke to individuals who were successful in their rural communities. Maybe they're still chatting with people who were successful in their rural communities. And all of a sudden, they can pick up the phone and say, hey, you know, I met you 5 or 6 years ago at this event that, you know, you were sponsoring at UNK or whatever, you know, the community college around. You still working at a bank? I'm thinking about starting a small business. Can we chat? Right? By cultivating those connections in college and ideally maintaining those connections over time, you've created roads, you've created a path back. And I just think that's vitally important. I spoke with the new director of our entrepreneurship and rural economic development center. Sorry, Tim, if I messed that up. But he and I just chatted about, you know, maybe having a lecture series where we bring in rural bankers or rural attorneys or rural entrepreneurs, right? And we're not talking about big tech entrepreneurs. We're talking about somebody who started a company and made it grow, right? Or bringing in one day people who might be thinking about selling their companies in 5 or 6 years, right? Or 10 years down the line. Connecting, you know, starting the talk on succession planning now while people are in the university. I think if you approached UNK and a myriad of other institutions, we'd be open to facilitating that. We'd be open to trying to figure out how to connect business people and community leaders with the people that might be willing to come to their towns 5 or 6 years down the line, right? So really just connecting now for the future. And let's jump to the next slide. The last thing I want to, oh, sorry, these are women in construction programs, my apologies, but these were the women in construction programs that we talked about, right? That's not, can we go back one real fast? Sorry. That's not the typical quintessential big burly construction person that you're picturing. But these people, all of them, some of these are high school students, and I see Annika, who is one of our CM students right there, just her face right in the middle. And she's bright and she is smart. And I can tell you probably shouldn't have given her name, but I won't give her last name, and it was another institution, but her grades were far higher than almost any other guy in that class. All right. So now we see the face of construction, and it looks a little bit different. And it's not important that I see it. It's important that they see it. They have a roadmap for moving forward in the future. And so, all right, let's go to the next one. And this one is think big. All right. And so what I mean by this, and Tim, I will choose my words very carefully. All right. So there is an institution somewhere in the Midwest that recognized that young people didn't want to come to their community. All right. That young people wanted to be in larger urban areas to connect with other young people. And so what this community did is they went out to a university, and essentially they set up a program where the senior year of college, university students would be housed in this town, all right? An entire year, right? Wow, thinking big. Not only did they do that, they managed to get money from the state to support it, all right? So what happens after somebody's in a town for a year? All right. Well, I can tell you, I know only one of my students who has moved to rural Nebraska since I've been there. He lives right here in Holdridge, and his connection to Holdridge was he was working on the hospital and he was working on the movie theater out here. He was essentially an intern project manager on both of those projects. When it came time to graduate, he was going to be located in central Nebraska. And he and his girlfriend decided, you know what? We're gonna be moving around a lot. We're gonna be traveling with work. We can get a house a whole lot less expensive in Holdridge than we can in Kearney. So he bought a house out here in Holdridge. But what I think probably drove that for him was the time that he spent here, right? So this other city, you know, they can get people there for a year. Those people can start to make connections. Maybe they stick around, right? Now, I don't know that that works for every community, but that's just one idea of thinking big, right? Thinking bigger. And I got one other example of thinking big. We can just flip to the next one. So prior to coming to UNK, I had accepted a job at a university in the United Kingdom. All right, COVID wound up hitting, and I couldn't take that job, but that job was in Wolverhampton. I can't see anybody's face, but if there's any Wolverhampton Wolves fans here, Wanderers, go Wanderers. I watch them religiously once a week. All right. But what happened is this is a community outside of Birmingham, England. This is Black's country. Think of the Industrial Revolution and coal and smog and everything else, right? Like these old industrial type cities. And so the University of Wolverhampton is in one of these old industrial cities. And on the side of town away from the primary campus, there was this old brewery, right? The brewery had burnt down in 2004. It was derelict. I mean, it was just, abatement would have come in and shut it down a bit, you know, and bulldoze the whole thing if they could. And so this blight was there in the city. And they recognize that they need people to do construction, and not just to manage construction, but they also need tradespeople. They also need, they need tradespeople coming out of high school, and they need adults that are reskilling and learning a new trade as things move along. And so what the university and the city and a few other stakeholders did is they came together and they built this Springfield campus. They took that old brewery, that thing that had burnt down, that was just an eyesore in the city, and they made Europe's largest construction campus. They co-housed design and construction high school, the School of the Built Environment, and an adult workforce education center, all on this campus, right? It wasn't about just getting the university or getting the tradespeople or, you know, the skilled labor. This was completely holistic. And so right now I'll just show you a short video on that. And so you can kind of see the evolution and what this wound up becoming. I'm not hearing audio on my end. Is there?
And reanimating an historic 12-acre inner city site.
The Springfield campus epitomises what's happening across the West Midlands.
Trying to make sure that we develop skills and knowledge base for the future, focusing on construction.
A former Wolverhampton brewery is to be redeveloped.
It's terrible. It's horrible to see it like this. I see this going to be kept alive.
I think this is an absolutely unique opportunity. Really excited about the new scheme that's coming up at Springfield.
It's very exciting that we will have some of our graduates developing solutions that are sustainable and cost effective for the development.
That is what this campus is about. Let's bring it all together as part of the university opportunity.
Where there's spring, there's life.
There's the new, there's the old. Right? That's probably good, Sherry. Okay, just my point there, right? They thought big. They thought big. They didn't just say, "Hey, let's just do higher ed or let's just do vocational education." They said, "Hey, here's this eyesore in the community. Let's all come together and create something bigger and better." I was excited to work there. I love working here in Nebraska, but that would have been an exciting place too. And what was a derelict something is now a beautiful place that's probably attracting people from around the world. So that was my portion. And so we're going to do an official handoff back to Becca, and we're going to continue with the end of with her presentation.
So kind of just tying it back to to the housing industry and stuff in our rural areas and stuff. A lot of the housing is cycling into a change, and the change is not in big farmhouses located outside of town. It's not 5-bedroom, 2-3 bathrooms. It's more of a 1 or 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom kind of space, whether that be a townhome, an apartment. People just aren't really creating families like they used to. They're creating small families, sometimes not even having kids. I mean, people aren't as oriented towards large families as they used to be. And so the housing market isn't reflected in that. Our housing market is reflected towards a much larger family aspect where it needs to be towards a smaller family, or even towards transitional housing for people, or for like the elderly age that are just transitioning out of that larger home to make room for those larger homes that are needed. And a lot of our housing is not reflected in that. Less and less homes are being built every year, compared to 20 years ago. It's cut in half in how many houses have been built. The majority of the houses that are left are from the 1970s or before. Less houses have just been built, and that's due to inflation, and that's due to the lack of people being there to be able to build them. And so a lot of my time was just going to communities and just kind of reaching out and seeing what their needs were and just evaluating them. And so I just kind of went through like different communities and just identified their issues and did a lot of research in each community, and just kind of proposed a possible solution that the communities could adapt, whether they chose to go that route or chose to go a different route. A lot of my time was spent in Bertrand and Franklin and Superior. And with Bertrand, we as SCED, as a team, a community, they reached out to us first, and they were like, we're having these really big issues. We're not quite finding the houses that we need to support the workforce that we're in demand for. They have workers that they want to come, but they don't have anywhere for those workers to be. And so I came up with SCED came up with the option of just creating a map to show that you have locations for housing. You have, the option, but it's not out there, and it's not being met, and they're not being able to be sold and bought. And so just identifying the properties that could be of potential for houses for the potential workforce that they have. And they also identified some other needs that they met by starting an investment club that would work on building and buying village lots to work and create more housing. With Franklin, their issues were they have a lot of nuisance and a lot of vacant places that they felt were not meeting the community's expectations, and they wanted to identify if those could be turned and either redeveloped or repaired or things like that, just to return them to the housing market and get those people that they have coming to their community and getting them in. So it's an opportunity for those cities, those villages, that other communities can develop the same map by going to your community and asking for your county's map or list that they have, and just seeing if there is somewhere you can buy that nobody else would necessarily think of, that say, oh, you know, it's a 2-bedroom, 3-bath house or something like that, that could be developed into something more, whether that be a multi-unit or just a single home. With Red Cloud, SCED has recently started the nuisance abatement program with them, and they've identified that Red Cloud wasn't really getting it out. And so to get them out and get the community educated about what nuisance abatement was, it wasn't them targeting certain people for not upkeeping their house. It was just the community feeling that the need of picking up their community to bring more people to their community and just to have a better atmosphere about their community. And so I created like a social advertisement they could post on their Facebook, on their website, things like that, just to get it out and get people informed what nuisance abatement was, that they didn't necessarily explain to their community, or the community didn't even know what was going on. They just got a letter in the mail and they were really confused. And so this just kind of helped them evaluate and understand what was going on. And then moving on with Superior has a lot going on. They have a new hospital. They have a program that they've created to create a smaller house for their intermediate and their workforce that's coming in, that they just needed, you know, somewhere to put them because they didn't have a place to have. And so we created kind of a guide is what we've called it, just to compile a bunch of parcels that the city owns. These are all city owned lots. We didn't put any private owned lots that the city would be willing to offer incentives and the ground for developers to come in and build residential housing, whether that be single family, multifamily, you know, just developments that they really need that housing, and just to show that Superior is growing and they're coming back from a hard time that they had due to COVID and everything, and that they're building back, and they would really like someone to come in and just cooperate with them and co-op and, you know, build their community and build the developers companies as well and get their word out there. Stemming off of theirs, so this is just kind of what's part of the developer's guide, and you identify a parcel and just what's incorporated in the parcel, just eliminating all of those factors, the questions that the developers may have as to, is this a good lot? Would there be potential here? Can we develop on it? Just giving the parcel's history and everything behind the parcel, as well as possible floor plans for that square footage that's available, and bringing that community tie and just having the local vendors available, and just showing that the local vendors are there. They have the supply. They need someone to come in and meet that other gap they're just not reaching within the community, and that's just builders, you know. And so they have a list of vendors, and so we reached out and we sent a list of developers, and I created a bunch of concept floor plans. It does not have to be what developers go with, but just to give the developers an idea of what that land could potentially hold. And some of them, I mean, are, you know, apartments or a duplex or things like that. They're big enough for that, and that it would be worth the developer's time to come to their community and see that it's worth investing in their community. With the small homes portfolio, I created a portfolio of all the houses that I've created, and just their floor plans, and just a solution for the community to identify their housing need. And you don't need a 5-bedroom house. I mean, a lot of people are in 5-bedroom house, and it's a single person or a couple. They don't need that much floor space, but bringing something that's more useful into the community and not taking something from the community. And then there's multifamily as well. So there's duplexes and apartments, all of different styles. Just a bunch of different styles that each person, you know, could cater to and just feel like home in a small community. With my internship, I learned a lot. I mean, something that going into this, I didn't know what I was going to learn. Nobody knew what was going to go with my internship. And so, I mean, I definitely learned a lot of professional skills that I did not have before, both with oral and written communications. I've definitely worked on expanding my vocabulary and just typing in general. It's definitely opened my eyes to a lot of more possibilities that I could go into with learning this side of it, that it's not just all going into a big company and just building floor plans. It's meeting that need that's there that's not getting met. And it just made me realize that I'm maybe not cut out for some big company. I'm more down for the mom and pop show.
Well, I think she's cut out for a big company, but if she wants to go or not, that's totally on her. I've seen her work here and at UNK. So that's all we have. Who drives from here? We go back to you, Sharon, or is it Lori? Or
Yeah, so we do have your contact information on the screen for our attendees today if they wanted to reach out to you or Becca and follow up with some things or want to know more. So we are going to open it up for a time of conversation and some Q&A with our speakers. We do have a couple questions in the chat box for the two of you. Morgan had asked, she recognizes the problems that communities are having in finding contractors. She just wondered if our UNK or maybe other post-secondary institutions are making students aware of grants that the Department of Economic Development make available to communities and other eligible entities to build in Nebraska. That was the first question I have for you.
yeah, and the answer is no. All right. And for better or for worse, and this is why I think connecting people from the communities, business people, economic development people with our students is where this would take place, right? So no, we actually have a pretty good pipeline between our employers, straight out of university. They support us both coming to our classrooms and financially and other things. But and this would be so much more powerful coming from like the individuals on this call. These students, some of them want to know this. If you create a forum, we can help them go that way. Because quite frankly, I didn't know about this, right? I come from production home building. I worked for homes that did companies that did 500, 350 homes a year, right? I worked for big publicly traded companies, and we had cash and we had people. It was just a matter of getting through it as quick as possible. This is all new to me, but when it's presented to me, I get excited about it. So yeah, when you present it to the students, I think those students who really want to live in rural communities, they will get stoked. And now you're showing a way back to your community.
I was thinking as you shared about connecting with students, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but I think it was County Economic Development or the City of O'Neill would give mailboxes to their high school graduates when they graduate from high school saying, we don't expect you to stay here, but when you come back, here's the first home, welcome home gift for you, your own mailbox. And so that was impactful. I'd be curious to know if how many of those students have returned home to that area, but I was thinking of that as you spoke. So would welcome other ideas from those on the call today. But Deb had a couple questions for us, and maybe this is Jared, Becca, others on the call. Are there other communities who are looking at zoning barriers, subdividing lots, locations for manufactured housing, i.e. trailers, allowing small houses next to traditional homes on large lots? What might it take to change those zoning issues?
Sorry, this is outside of my area of expertise, so I'm sure there's other people.
Yeah, and if somebody has a solution to Deb's questions, please open your microphone. I just wanted to reiterate, a couple of years ago, I don't remember the exact month, but we had Candace Alder from the city of Norfolk talk about their developers guide. And Norfolk is what, 25,000 people, maybe even 30,000. But Becca's project of scaling that down to a rural community of 2,000, and just the excitement that that can create in a smaller community to have information available for when that builder or developer comes in. They don't have time to go find out what the setbacks are or what utilities are available on vacant lots. They don't even know where the vacant lots are necessarily, but a developer's guide such as Norfolk or such as Becca developed for Superior really kind of makes that residential developer's path in life a little bit easier if he does want to return to his home community. So
I do think, having worked for several production builders, I grew up in Florida, right? So my town went from 7,000 from about the time I was born, 40 some odd years ago, to 120,000 now. I mean, so the growth is unbelievable. And my family was in production home building. It was funny because you would build a house or a subdivision, and then you would get calls the next year saying, I don't approve that next subdivision going in next door, right? So I was fine with my subdivision, but now it needs to stop here, right? Not in my backyard, sort of thing. So depending on the size of your communities, I think really educating your community and people in your neighborhoods on hey, we all want to grow. We all want our community to not only survive but to thrive, and part of that is being open to things that are maybe just a little bit different than in the past. And yeah, maybe if I was a marketing person, I could give a better idea of how to get them on board. But I do think, yeah, getting your communities on board with it and letting them know that, you know, we're not going to survive. We're going to thrive, and that means bringing in different people and different types of housing. And yeah, we have a good place here. Let others thrive here.
Okay, good. Yeah, so it looks like mailboxes are being given around the state to high school graduates, and in Holt County, they continue to do that. So just wanted to share that. What other questions are there for our speakers today? What might you be taking away from their presentation today and putting one step forward, so to speak, in your community or your organization?
I'm going to step back and address this issue that Deb Cottier brought up, if I could, since I don't hear 7,000 other people just piping in, huh? I really think we have to find out who is doing this, who is successfully subdividing lots, making areas available for manufactured housing, allowing small houses next to larger, making smaller lots. I know we heard of a couple projects when we were at the NIFA conference, where if the community had allowed smaller lots for these townhomes that are primarily filled with widowed elderly women, they aren't mowing their own yards. They don't want big yards. They don't need swing sets and all those things. We could have had more homes put there. And it seems to me that city councils believe city council members from other communities, planners believe planners, you know, there's that trust within the different career choices. And if we can find communities, they don't have to be in Nebraska, but we really need to get our feelers out to organizations in other communities. Maybe the League of Nebraska Municipalities can help us out. So is there a League of Iowa municipalities? Is there a League of Colorado or Kansas? And find out who's making this work. And then we begin to bring those people together. And as you find those speakers, let us know. We'd be, you know, happy to bring some of them on here. But I think that if we're in there telling them, well, we're always, you know, like for us, I get accused of being a good salesperson because sometimes that's what economic developers are. You know, we are optimists and always looking at the next opportunity. And so when I come in, they shield themselves like, oh, for crying out loud, here she comes again with some, you know, big idea or trying to talk us into something. But if we can have a zoning person talk to another zoning person, city administrators chatting amongst themselves, if we can foster that, if we can convene those people, I really think that's where we need to be.
Well, Sharon, I think you're right, spot on, because one of the things that we are continually challenged with is someone from a larger city, for example, will have an idea about putting in some function, whether it's retail with housing above it. I mean, there's all kinds of different varieties of suggestions, and our zoning person, bless her heart, is challenged with figuring out if we can or can't do that in our community. And I know she's frustrated as well, but how do you start? And I know we are, as a community, going to have a wholesale look at our entire zoning regulation process. And perhaps that's where we can maybe address some of this. But we've had housing developments and apartment complexes couldn't be done where they wanted to do it because it wasn't zoned right. And nobody wants to take on the challenge of changing zoning and that sort of thing. So it really does stymie the creativity that I see in some of the stuff that Becca was presenting. You know, we are shooting ourselves in the foot, and I'm hopeful that maybe either through the zoning, and there's even an organization of zoners and planners, IPVA or something like that. Maybe this is an idea that can continue to bubble up.
Maybe we need to infiltrate their conference and start some conversation cafes, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and sometimes I think of a community that I work with, you know, they couldn't build in a flood zone, even though the flood zone was just a microscopic piece of the lot. So they thought outside the box and subdivided the lot and built on the front half. And so that new parcel was no longer in a floodplain. You know, they created two separate parcels out of one. So it was an easy, simple solution, but it just took thinking outside the box to accomplish that. So yeah, so
right. It really kind of goes back though to what we learned last month from our Callaway speakers, and that is we need those yay sayers, not the naysayers. We have to have somebody that's willing to do the research to know what it takes to walk through those zoning changes. They seem overwhelming, but really it's a step-by-step process. And if I don't know what it is, I'm overwhelmed by it. But if I can get in there and figure it out, and I think we have a lot of resources that will help us do that, to learn how to do use the different tools that we have.
I mean, I'm always a fan of having like small case study repositories. And so Lori's talking about one thing, and oh, that never occurred to me. But and I'm sure half the people on this call have little examples. And yeah, are they all one-offs? They are. But if you can get all of those one-offs in one place, then I can go and say, all right, now I got an idea. You know, we've been looking at this. Look at what this community did to work through this. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of islands. But if there's a way to bring that all together, I mean, I love case studies for that reason. It's just because, all right, that is something that I had never thought of. I would have never gone that way. But I'm glad Deb figured that out so that I don't have to.
Well, and you know, HomeNE can be one of those repositories. That's kind of a perfect segue to let people know about our webinar today, and as well as the past webinars are on our website. And when we redesigned the website, we made it searchable. So for example, you know, Sharon mentioned Callaway. You can now go search and find out more about what Callaway presented on last month. I have a couple snips here. if you remember Ansley from a couple of years ago, and that's all you remember, you can find their webinar, or Binkelman. And so you guys will also be on our website, so people can go in and hear once again, Jared, your conversation about bringing our graduates back to their hometowns and what Becca did this summer here at SCED. So that's one of those repositories that we can make available through the HomeNE Learning Network. So thank you for that. So as we begin to wrap up, are there any other questions for our speakers? Well,
yes, I have one. Would you please put up the contact information again, please?
Sure.
Thanks. I
There you
didn't get
go.
it all written down.
And we will be sending out slides to all of you who registered for today, and you'll have that information as well. So our next webinar is going to be September 15th. It's the third Thursday of September, and be watching for details as to whom our speaker and what the topic will be in the coming weeks. That information will be getting mailed out to you in a couple weeks. So, okay. Jared and Becca, I do want to say thank you once again for your time and for joining us today. It was greatly appreciated and very informative. So, are there any last questions or comments for our speakers or for any of us today?
Thanks, everyone. Great session.
Thank you, Beverly. If not, thank you to all of you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks all.